I'll take my belt and fly away. That should be
I
wrestling.
believe I can fly.
That should be wrestling.
With that being said, you know who else is flying? You know, Jake Paul has apparently flown from a boxing ring to an MMA cage, or at least so it seems, as he's signed with PFL. I don't know, man. We asked you guys what you guys thought on Knockouts and Three Counts podcast on Facebook, which hopefully you guys are following this. If you're watching it on YouTube, you know, you can follow us at KO3C Pod on Twitter and Instagram and all those things. And feel free to chime in on the conversation. But, you know, we had people asking things like, is this going to be a game-changing move? What do we think about him going to PFL? I think for the PFL, it's a great move because it's a way that it's going to bring eyes to them instantly. And to be honest, with who's out on the market and all those things, I don't know that there's that many names, especially now that Kayla Harrison, who was like their big star, has lost, who they could go get right now that would instantly bring eyes in the way that Jake Paul is going to bring eyes. And now it's also been said that he's going to head up a new division that's going to be in PFL as well. And it's interesting because now you've got the challenge that he laid out saying that he wants to fight Nate Diaz, but only if Nate Diaz will box Jake Paul first. I guess before we get into our thoughts on the call out from Jake Paul, Corey, what do you think about Jake Paul signing with PFL?
Well, a couple thoughts, right? Let me run you through my mind this morning as I'm sitting there looking through my phone real quick.
The Judas in my mind.
And I'm like, oh shit. This is like Jake Paul signed to PFL. Wow, this is like you said, Kyle, this very well could be a game-changing moment both in like his career, right? He actually like made that move where he signed to a MMA organization, very reminiscent of the Clarissa Shields signing, in my opinion. That's what it really reminded me of when I first, like, in the early morning haze thoughts, was like, wow, this is like kind of like the Clarissa Shields signing. They got her, you know, they're gonna have him fight a couple off fights and stuff. And then I do a little further digging, and to your point, Kyle, he's starting not necessarily a new division as in like weight class or something that they're going to have a championship, you know, fight for every year in their championship playoff series format that they normally run. No, it's going to be the pay-per-view division, or however he worded it, where it's basically going to be like a invite only. Maybe they'll have some of the current champions, former champions, or something like that, or roster guys that aren't currently performing on the season and stuff like that, do the pay-per-views that I had noted, I don't know, maybe 6 months, 8 months, a year ago or something here on the show, where I had noted that PFL, they had the CEO go on the MMA Hour, and they had this big breakdown of how they're going to start incorporating pay-per-views into their, you know, business model, and how they feel as though they'll be successful doing it. This is the only way, in my opinion, that you could all of a sudden be successful doing it. They're behind a semi-legitimate wall in ESPN, so it's going to be harder for the streamers out there that want to just stream it. And on top of that, you got genuine interest now in the Jake Paul signing and what he's going to be able to bring, who he's going to be able to bring, and if there's going to be any stars that he's able to, you know, lure into also fighting for the PFL and stuff. It kind of goes back to what I was saying the other day with the whole Wiz Khalifa thing. Like, it would be not so crazy now that we have a Jake Paul headlining the card, and we could see Wiz Khalifa fighting some, you know, somebody else in the co-main on a pay-per-view slot, you know?
Yeah.
So it's just, honestly, the move.
Here comes Mike Jackson.
Here's the move is wild. I really do think it was in the best interest of both parties involved, though. I really feel like it It's something where Jake Paul now gets to say, hey, remember 2 years ago when everybody's like, okay, yeah, you're a boxer, but you won't ever fight MMA. And he's like, oh, give it some time. I still got my boxing career. Well, now he's going to continue to box here and there, but he's also going to, eventually do an MMA fight, and he's signed under a major organization. So all signs are pointing in the right direction. He's already pointed us or proved us wrong on multiple occasions, or at least myself, he's proved wrong. So I'm excited, man. I feel like it does nothing but really build up the prospect of an organization that I continuously try to shine a light for here on the show, but I feel like they just don't get the level of promotion that they need to be a thriving organization in this field.
Corey, so where does it start though? Like what's the starting point for Jake Paul, competition wise? They're not going to throw him in there with a top tier level MMA guy, right? That wouldn't be a smart business move to go in there and just get his head knocked off. I mean, I don't think so. You don't want him to do a one and done.
No, you don't want him to do a one and done. But if he loses to somebody like a Nate Diaz, then it generates a
that fight makes perfect sense. That fight makes sense. But I think he's talking about like one of their killers.
Yeah, I don't think they do some Magomedov or something, that they have killing through the 170 division or something. I don't think they'd go that route. I think they bring in either, celebrities or star talent, or they continue to do maybe some of the like more off matchups, but I could definitely see the Nate Diaz thing coming to fruition. I feel like if there's any way to kind of really lure him in besides just a one-off in a match, it's, hey, here's a contract I'm already in a legitimate organization. You're gonna get 50% of the pay-per-view sales and all that. And if that's the case, that's like, you do one fight with them, you're gonna make real money.
Yeah.
You generate some views, that's real money. And so
but
I feel like
think about on the flip side though is the money that PFL is going to have to shell out though, because you figure if you're going to get a guy like Nate Diaz, he ain't coming in there for no chump change. And Jake Paul, because Jake Paul also has equity in the company. Because here's the thing too, even if Jake Paul does go in there and get his ass kicked at this point, because he's got equity in PFL now, if they make a bunch of money, even if he gets his ass kicked, Jake Paul's going to make a bunch of money.
That's what I mean. He's double banking. He's the house and the player. You know what I mean? He's winning either way. So
he's playing on
that's
house
what I mean.
money,
I feel to your point with how do they just bring in some guy for him to steamroll, type of like the Bellator approach, where they're like, yeah, we got this up and comer and we're going to put him against a guy who's 5-4, who his 5 wins are questionable. I don't think they do that route. I think they let him continue to do his boxing thing, and I think they pluck one of these guys, like a Nate Diaz, a Tony Ferguson. I hate to say it, but somebody of that ilk where they're still respected, but their fighting style is predominantly stand-up. They're not going to really go in there chasing to tear limbs off them and stuff, and Jake's going to be slightly the bigger guy. It's going to be at a catch weight or a very favorable weight for him. And I feel like they will put him against somebody who's a proven talent, but past their prime, and somebody who he can get a win against. You know what I mean? Is it necessarily for sure? Yeah, but I feel
CM Punk.
I'll be honest with you though, dude. Even the Nate Diaz fight, though, the Nate Diaz fight, even in itself, like, sure, could he win that fight? Yeah, maybe. But in an MMA fight, I think Nate kicks his ass. And I think Jake Paul, again, this is where the equity of that comes in, because I think Jake Paul's looking at this as, okay, that's why he threw out the 2-fight deal. Because you figure if they're going to box and that means you're going to get a boxing fight out of it, and then you're going to get an MMA fight out of it, because he's going to get a camp for both. So that means not only is he going to get paid twice to fight, he's also going to make the equity money off of that. So if I'm Jake Paul, Jake Paul's got to be looking at that as, I can go out here, and in boxing, there's a good chance he might be able to knock out Nate, and go out here. Maybe he knocks Nate out in a boxing fight. And if he
turn
doesn't,
around and
he
fight
probably
him 6 months later.
Fight him in
and
MMA.
then, yeah.
And if Nate, so let's just say Nate submits him, which 9 times out of 10 would be what I would guess might happen. But if Nate submits him, then it's like, okay, well, I was supposed to lose to Nate Diaz.
Yeah.
But in a boxing match, if he's got that knockout to go along with it, so he can say, yeah, we're 1-1, I think he gets out of it. And then if you're Nate Diaz, then you can go back to the UFC, if that's what you want to do to try to get that fight with Conor. But I just, on the flip side, do you think there's any chance that if they do the boxing fight first and say Jake wins, and it's like maybe like a controversial win, or he just knocks him out, do you think there's any chance that he tries to find a way out before we get to the MMA fight?
I can see that.
I don't think he's I'll steal Bisbing's term. I don't think he's a dildo Dennis. I don't think he pulls out of fights a week and a half before they are scheduled to happen. But no, I that's one thing I can say that I have kind of put faith in Jake Paul, especially for the fact that he runs his own promotion, has now aligned himself in a way where he has stakehold in PFL. So when he does perform for them, yet again, it'll be for himself while also for them. So I feel like if anything, he's the one that's like dealing with the people like Tommy Fury, who are the people that pull out of his fights. You know what I mean? I feel like it's the opposite. I feel like he's game. He's just fighting a bunch of people who aren't always game. Yeah.
Maybe that's just a big plan to take down his arch nemesis Dana White.